In the 1950s, 1 in every 4 motorcycles sold anywhere on Earth carried a British badge. Triumph owned half the American large bike market. Norton dominated the Isle of Man TT for nearly a decade. BSA was the biggest motorcycle manufacturer on the planet. But by 1978, every one of those factories was closed, demolished, or abandoned. And the man who took nearly £5 million of taxpayer money to save the industry had walked away with the company that made London's black taxicabs instead. His name was Dennis Poore, and this is how he killed British motorcycles. To understand the scale of what was destroyed, you need to know how big these companies actually were. In 1959, Triumph held 50% of the American market for motorcycles over 500 cubic centimeters, half of every large bike sold in the United States. The BSA Group, which owned both BSA and Triumph, accounted for 80% of all British motorcycle exports. They won the Queen's Award to Industry for Export Achievement in both 1967 and 1968. And the cultural impact was absolutely everywhere. In 1953, Marlon Brando wrote his own personal 1950 Triumph Thunderbird in The Wild One, the film that single-handedly invented the rebellious biker archetype. It was so controversial, the British government banned it for 14 years. A decade later, Steve McQueen performed much of his own riding on a Triumph TR6 trophy in The Great Escape, with his stunt double Bud Ekins handling the famous fence jump. McQueen loved British bikes so much, he eventually owned over 200 motorcycles. Even James Dean was a Triumph rider, storing his bikes in a Greenwich Village garage, where a young part-time mechanic named Steve McQueen shared the same obsession. You honestly cannot make this stuff up. Back in England, the ton-up boys and rockers gathered at the AC Cafe on London's North Circular Road, stripped their Tritons and Gold Stars down to bare essentials, and raced to hit 100 miles per hour before a jukebox record finished playing. Norton's racing domination was borderline absurd. Norton won the Isle of Man Senior TT every single year from 1947 to 1954, 8 consecutive years of total domination around the most dangerous racing circuit on Earth. Jeff Duke won 6 world championships riding Nortons. Edward Turner's 1938 Triumph Speed Twin had established the parallel twin engine layout that defined British motorcycle design for nearly half a century. Every time you see a modern parallel twin today, you are looking at Turner's legacy. Annual production peaked at around 140,000 motorcycles per year by 1960. BSA's massive Small Heath factory in Birmingham sprawled across 25 acres and employed thousands. The BSA Group had roughly 8,000 workers in 1966, with 2/3 of them based at Small Heath alone. The Triumph factory at Meriden near Coventry hummed with 1,700 workers turning out Bonnevilles and Tigers. This was an empire built on chrome, cast iron, and an unshakable belief that nobody could ever build a better motorcycle than the British. But empires fall, and this one had a very specific assassin. On September 11, 1959, American Honda Motor Company opened its doors in Los Angeles. By that point, Honda was already the world's largest motorcycle producer, and the British industry's response was a masterclass in arrogance. Edward Turner, Triumph's legendary designer and BSA's managing director, flew to Japan in September 1960 and toured the Honda factory. What he saw terrified him. His report back to the BSA board described the Honda plant as a dynamic experience and a somewhat frightening spectacle. He reported that Honda's surface finishes and machining accuracy were better than anything Britain produced. He warned that Japan was already making over 500,000 motorcycles a year, compared with Britain's 140,000. And he noted that Honda employed around 400 technicians in research and development alone, a number that was, in his words, out of all proportion to anything ever visualized in this country. But Turner's report contained one catastrophic miscalculation that would haunt the entire industry. He told the board he did not believe Japanese motorcycles would replace the traditional British machine. He thought the Japanese would stay confined to small displacement bikes. The board read that sentence, breathed a collective sigh of relief, and did absolutely nothing. No investment in new factories, no modern production lines, no research budget increases. Turner eventually retired in frustration around 1962. The man who could have saved British motorcycles walked away because nobody would listen to him. They were so So wrong. Honda's assault on America was devastating. In June 1963, they launched the You Meet the Nicest People on a Honda campaign, and it ran in Life magazine and Playboy, not just motorcycle publications. Honda's U.S. advertising budget hit $2.18 million. The Beach Boys wrote Little Honda in 1964. By that year, Honda commanded over 50% of the entire U.S. motorcycle market. The Japanese strategy was brilliant. They started with small bikes, 50 cubic centimeters to 250 cubic centimeters, perfected mass production and reliability, then moved upmarket. The Honda CB450 Black Bomber in 1965 nearly matched British 650 cubic centimeter performance. The British just kept retreating to the next larger engine class, thinking that they could not compete up here. The Boston Consulting Group later gave this a name. They called it segment retreat. Then came the kill shot. At the Tokyo Motor Show in November 1968, Honda unveiled the CB750. It was the world's first mass-production inline four-cylinder motorcycle with an overhead cam, electric start, a front disc brake, and a 5-speed gearbox. 68 horsepower, all for about $1,500, which was roughly half the price of a comparable British 750 cubic centimeter motorcycle. Think about that for a second. More technology, more reliability, better finish, and half the price. The British industry's answer was the BSA Rocket 3 and the Triumph Trident, which had technically launched just weeks earlier. Both were solid bikes, actually. The Trident even won the 1971 production TT at the Isle of Man, but they had 4-speed gearboxes, push-rod engines, kickstarters, drum brakes, and vertically split crankcases that leaked oil everywhere. One historian described the CB750 as the four-shooter that assassinated the whole British motorcycle industry. Only about 27,000 Tridents were built over the model's entire 7-year production run. Honda sold over 400,000 CB750s in its first decade, and the factory productivity gap was almost comical. Honda's Suzuka factory produced approximately 350 motorcycles per worker per year. The BSA factory at Small Heath managed about 10. Possibly 60% of the machine tools at the Wolverhampton plant were more than 20 years old. The British were literally trying to fight a technological war with Victorian-era equipment. If you're enjoying this deep dive into motorcycle history, hit subscribe. We cover stories like this every week. Now here's where things get really ugly. BSA Group's financial implosion hit like a bomb in 1971. The company reported trading losses of £8 million, with £22 million in total debt. 3,000 workers were laid off at the Small Heath factory in Birmingham. The management succession had been a disaster for years. After Edward Turner retired, his replacement Harry Sturgeon died of a brain tumor in 1967. Lionel Joffé, who came from a gyroscope company, replaced him but was criticized for having no feel for the motorcycle business. The board consistently chose short-term dividends over factory investment year after year after year. The most heartbreaking casualty of the collapse was the BSA Fury and Triumph Bandit. These were twin 350 cubic centimeter prototypes with overhead cams, genuinely modern bikes that Cycle Guide magazine had called the freshest thing to come out of England in 20 years. They were canceled on the eve of production when the money ran out. Only about 12 pre-production models were ever built. 5 survive today. They represent what British motorcycles could have become if anyone at the top had been willing to invest in the future instead of milking the past. Lord Shawcross, the famous Nuremberg prosecutor, was installed as chairman in 1971 to lead a last-ditch rescue. Barclays Bank put up £10 million. But it wasn't enough. By 1972, the BSA share price had collapsed to almost nothing. The company was functionally dead, and the vultures were circling. And that's when Dennis Poore entered the picture. Now, Poore wasn't some random businessman parachuting in from another industry. That's what makes this story so frustrating. He was a genuine petrol head. Born in 1916 in Paddington, London, his father was killed on the Western Front in 1917 when Dennis was barely a year old. He grew up in a military family with connections to Scottish aristocracy and, crucially, to the Manganese Bronze Company. He graduated from King's College, Cambridge with an engineering degree, served as RAF wing commander in the Second World War, and then became a serious racing driver. This guy could actually drive. He won the RAC British Hill Climb Championship in 1950, campaigning a pre-war Alfa Romeo that had originally been raced by the legendary Tazio Nuvolari. He competed in 2 Formula One World Championship Grands Prix in 1952, finishing 4th at the British Grand Prix at Silverstone for 3 championship points. He later drove for the Aston Martin factory sports car team, co-winning the Goodwood 9 Hours race in 1955. In 1950, he even bankrolled the founding of Autosport magazine, promising editor Gregor Grant that the publication would never fold while he was alive. So here was a Cambridge-educated engineer, a genuine racing driver, a man who understood speed and machinery at an instinctive level. On paper, he was the perfect person to save the British motorcycle industry, and that's exactly what made his actions so devastating. But racing was a sideline. Poore's real talent was in the boardroom. He ran Manganese Bronze Holdings, originally a ship propeller company, and turned it into an acquisitions machine. He would buy distressed companies, sell off the parts he didn't want, and keep the profitable bits. When Associated Motorcycles, the company that owned Norton, AJS, Matchless, and others, went into receivership in 1966, Poore swooped in and bought the motorcycle business, forming Norton Villiers. And here's the thing, Poore actually did something incredible at first. He drove the development of the Norton Commando. He recruited his own Cambridge tutor, Dr. Stefan Bauer, a former Rolls-Royce nuclear scientist, as director of engineering. He gave the engineering team just 11 weeks to build a completely new motorcycle for the September 1967 Earl's Court Show. Bob Trigg, one of the engineers, remembered being told that if they didn't have a new bike ready, the company would go bust. In those 11 weeks, Trigg and Bernard Hooper created the ice-elastic rubber mounting system that tamed the old Atlas engine's vibrations. The Norton Commando won Motorcycle News Machine of the Year for 5 consecutive years, from 1968 to 1972. Around 60,000 were produced over its 10-year life. So at this point you might be thinking, okay, this guy actually sounds pretty good at running motorcycle companies. What went wrong? Everything went wrong in 1973. By then, BSA Triumph's losses were approaching £16 million. Lord Shawcross told the Department of Trade and Industry that the company could not meet its obligations. Prime Minister Edward Heath's Conservative government decided to force a merger between the dying BSA Triumph and Poore's Norton Villiers. Norton Villiers Triumph, known as NVT, was formed in July 1973. The government handed over £4.8 million of taxpayer money under Section 8 of the Industry Act. Poore was made chairman. The company inherited 4 factories, Small Heath in Birmingham, Meriden near Coventry, and facilities at Wolverhampton and Andover. But here is what was buried in the deal, and this is the detail that changes everything. Labour Member of Parliament Leslie Huckfield later revealed in Parliament that one of the preconditions Poore accepted before taking the chairmanship was that the Meriden factory had to close. The destruction of Triumph's heart was baked into this thing before a single meeting was held, before a single balance sheet was reviewed. The deal to save British motorcycles required destroying its most famous factory. Poore's logic was cold and clinical. He told the press the company was losing approximately £4 million a year, and $3 million of that could be saved by consolidating into one factory instead of 3. He planned to shut Meriden, move everything to Small Heath in Wolverhampton, sell the Meriden site to Jaguar Cars, and pocket the real estate money. Then he went further, much further. He killed the BSA motorcycle brand entirely, wiping out a name that had been making bikes since 1910. He made approximately 3,000 of the 4,500 workers redundant. 2/3 of the entire workforce were gone in the first months. The model range was slashed from dozens of variants to just 5 bikes. He sold off BSA's non-motorcycle interests, and his parent company, Manganese Bronze, extracted carbades from the wreckage, the manufacturer of London's iconic FX4 black taxicab. That would become Manganese Bronze's core business for decades to come. And then came the moment that turned this from a business story into a human tragedy. On the 14th of September 1973, Dennis Poore made his first and only visit to the Triumph factory at Meriden. He announced the factory would close and all 1,700 jobs would be lost. Then he turned around and left immediately, refusing to answer a single question from the workers who had just been told their livelihoods were over. He said he had an urgent meeting in London, Women workers held a funeral procession for the brand that same day, marching through the factory gates in black. The workers' response was immediate and ferocious. They chained the gates shut, occupied the entire factory, and refused to let any plant, machinery, components, or finished motorcycles leave the premises. Around 80 men assembled at the gates at all times, day and night, to prevent managers from retaking the building. They set up camp beds, cooking stations, and a rota system. This was not a protest, it was a siege. And it paralyzed NVT completely, because Meriden produced components that the other factories needed to build their bikes. The site-in lasted 18 months, from September 1973 to March 1975. It overlapped with some of the most chaotic months in modern British politics. Edward Heath's government fell in February 1974. Harold Wilson's Labour government replaced it, and Tony Benn became Secretary of State for Industry. Benn saw Meriden as a test case for workers' democracy and fought his own cabinet, the Civil Service, and the Industrial Development Advisory Board to secure funding. In March 1975, the Meriden Workers' Cooperative finally opened, backed by a government grant of £750,000 and a loan of £4.2 million. The co-op was limited to producing Triumph Bonnevilles and Tigers. Poore's response to the cooperative proposal surprised observers. He told reporters, "I think it is a marvelous idea." Whether that was genuine or sarcasm is still debated. But the cooperative could not save the broader industry, because by late 1974, NVT was hemorrhaging money. Over £3 million in losses. 13,000 unsold NVT motorcycles sat in warehouses around the world with no prospect of sales. The government asked the Boston Consulting Group to assess the situation, and their report was brutal. Maintaining the existing workforce would require government spending of approximately £50 million. The cost per job was about £17,000. On the 31st of July 1975, Industry Secretary Eric Varley stood in the House of Commons and delivered the death blow. He announced that nearly £24 million of public money had already been spent or committed to the motorcycle industry. The government refused to provide any more. Leslie Huckfield, Member of Parliament, asked the question everyone was thinking. Is it not about time that somebody asked Mr. Poore whether he sincerely wants to make or sell motorcycles? Poore hit back, accusing the government of doing more damage to the British motorcycle industry than all the might of the Japanese. The factories fell like dominoes after that. Wolverhampton went into receivership in September 1975 and closed on the 13th of October 1975, with 1,600 workers made redundant. Workers there formed their own action committee and briefly occupied the factory too, but it was too late. Small Heath closed in February 1976 after completing a final batch of Trident motorcycles for the Saudi Arabian police force. The T160 Trident was the last model ever assembled there. That vast factory, which had stood since 1863, had once employed over 5,000 people, had built rifles for 2 world wars and motorcycles that won championships all over the world, was demolished in 1977. Demolished, gone. Over a century of industrial history reduced to rubble and cleared for redevelopment. Around 1,500 unfinished Norton Commandos remained at the Wolverhampton plant after the closure. About 100 former workers were brought back under the official receiver's supervision to complete them. The very last Norton Commando to roll off the line, serial number 336537, was tested and accepted on the 18th of October, 1977. NVT was formally liquidated in 1978. The total public cost was staggering: £4.8 million for NVT's formation. £4.95 million allocated for the Meriden Cooperative, £8 million in export credit guarantees, various additional facilities, nearly £24 million of taxpayer money by mid-1975, with more write-offs to come. In October 1980, the government had to write off an additional £8.4 million owed by the Triumph Cooperative. The BCG report's production numbers told the whole devastating story. British motorcycle output had fallen from 170,000 machines in 1950 to 85,000 in 1968 to just over 20,000 by 1975. Meanwhile, Honda alone was producing over 2 million motorcycles per year. And Dennis Poore? He walked away with Carbides, the manufacturer of London's iconic black taxicab. That became Manganese Bronze's core business for decades. Critics had been right all along. As one Trident historian put it, Poore's business plan proved to be an asset strip of BSA for manganese bronze, rather than a genuine consolidation of the motorcycle industry. Norton itself limped on in various zombie forms. Poore established Norton Motors 1978, limited to continue work on a Wankel rotary engine, which eventually produced the Norton Interpol 2 for police forces in 1984. The brand's greatest moment after NVT came at the 1992 Isle of Man Senior TT, often voted the greatest TT race of all time, when Steve Hislop rode a tiny 588 cubic centimeters rotary Norton to a stunning 4.4-second victory over Carl Fogarty. It was the first British bike to win the Senior TT in 31 years. Norton could barely afford to be there. They had scraped together £25,000 from sponsors. Engineer Chris Mayhew recalled knowing they had one shot because it was obvious Norton had no future as a manufacturer. The brand later fell into the hands of fraudster Stuart Garner, who between 2008 and 2020 stole £11.5 million from pension funds, affecting over 228 pensioners. Indian manufacturer TVS Motor Company eventually acquired Norton in April 2020 for £16 million and has since invested heavily in rebuilding the brand. The Meriden Workers Cooperative actually outlasted NVT itself, running from 1975 until August 1983. At its pre-NVT peak, nearly 2,000 workers had produced 1,500 motorcycles per week at the Meriden plant. By the early 1980s, the cooperative had shrunk to just over 100 workers, making about 125 bikes a week. They built Bonnevilles, Tigers, and special editions including the 1977 Silver Jubilee model and the 1981 Royal Wedding Edition. Jeffrey Robinson MP served as managing director and achieved what he called a remarkably harmonious workplace. But the cooperative was fatally undercapitalized from day one. A 21% revaluation of sterling destroyed their export competitiveness. When the cooperative finally went bankrupt in 1983, the Meriden factory was demolished. A housing estate was built on the site, with streets named Bonneville Close and Daytona Drive. Those are the only physical reminders that Triumph motorcycles were ever made there. This story does have something close to a happy ending, and honestly, it's one of the greatest comeback stories in manufacturing history. When the Meriden Cooperative went bankrupt in 1983, a Derbyshire property developer named Bloor bought the Triumph name from the official receiver for £150,000, beating both Harley-Davidson and Italian manufacturer Cagiva to the purchase. Bloor had left school at 15, started working as a plasterer, and built Bloor Homes into one of Britain's largest construction companies. He was a self-made man with zero connections to the old motorcycle establishment, and that turned out to be exactly what Triumph needed. Bloor took a team to Japan in June 1983. They tore down Japanese motorcycles to understand modern production methods, and then threw away absolutely everything from the old Triumph. Every single thing. He invested a reported £80 million of his own money, not government money, his own money, into a state-of-the-art factory at Hinckley in Leicestershire, with CNC machining and robotics. His smartest move was a modular engine design, which, in a cruel twist of history, was the exact concept that chief designer Bert Hopwood had proposed to BSA Triumph back in 1973, before it all collapsed. The first Hinckley Triumphs rolled off the production line in 1991. Triumph turned its first profit in 2000 and survived a devastating factory fire in 2002 that could have ended everything. In 2024, Triumph sold a record 134,635 motorcycles. The first time in its 122-year history it had surpassed 100,000 units. Annual turnover hit nearly £700 million, with pre-tax profits of over £72 million. Bloor still owns 100% of the company through Bloor Holdings. No government bailouts, no asset stripping, just a man who believed in the product. Dennis Poore died on the 12th of February 1987, aged 70. His motorsport obituary was charitable, claiming the collapse of NVT was through no fault of his own. Wikipedia's assessment is more balanced, acknowledging that while BSA's management was hopeless, Poore's reconstruction plans were heavy-handed, and what is clear is that his actions led to the fragmentation of the industry when consolidation was essential. The truth is, Poore was not the sole villain. The industry was already dying from decades of underinvestment, board-level arrogance, and the refusal to take Japanese competition seriously when there was still time to respond. Edward Turner sounded the alarm in 1960, and his own board ignored him. The Honda CB750 delivered a blow that no amount of government money could fix. The factory tools were decades old. The management was catastrophically bad. The whole thing was ROT from the inside. But Poore accelerated the destruction when he should have slowed it down. He took public money earmarked for saving an industry. He closed its most productive factory before anyone had a chance to make it work. He made 2/3 of its workers redundant, and he killed the BSA brand forever. And he walked away with the taxi company. The fact that Triumph now sells over 130,000 motorcycles a year, built by a plasterer from Derbyshire who invested his own money instead of demanding public funds, only makes Poore's story more painful. John Bloor proved what was possible when someone actually cared about building motorcycles instead of stripping assets. And that is the tragedy at the heart of this whole story. It did not have to end this way. If this story blew your mind, you need to see how Honda went from a tiny engine company to the largest motorcycle manufacturer in the world. That video is on screen right now.